Gospel Gems Radio now presents Address to the University Community by the Honorable Dr. Keith Rowley, Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago.
Our distinguished and Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley and Mrs. Rowley, members of your delegation, Minister Reid, all members of Parliament and distinguished colleagues and students, all of our friends and colleagues who are with us on live stream, social media, and other systems of communications. Good afternoon to each and every one of you. You have just heard the Registrar making reference to a concept of futurism, but I would wish to begin by historicizing. That is my role. What is the nature of this moment? What is the nature of this moment into which we have welcomed Dr. Rowley here to speak to us? Well, we know a number of things about this moment. One, there is a perception that is growing and is finding traction in academia that we, the Caribbean peoples, we are running out of energy and losing our focus. That this is a moment in our long journey out of slavery, indenture, colonization, that long journey in which we have dedicated so much of our energy and our struggles. We've given life to move forward. We have now built nation states. We have independent nations. We have a younger generation of students who are looking to the future. And at this critical moment, we seem to be lacking in energy for another thrust. We are also hearing that this is a moment that requires leadership. It requires focus, high-principled leadership to take us where we need to go. It is in this moment that Dr. Rowley has intervened. We have been going through the stresses and the strains of economic decline in this region now for the better part of 30 years. Yes, we have heard recently of the impact of the global recession 07-08, but the truth of the matter is that we have not had collectively sustained growth in this region for over 2 decades. And the stresses and strain of that fact has been affecting our domestic relations. One of which has been the quarrel between our entrepreneurs in Jamaica, in Trinidad and Tobago, about the inequity of trade and perceptions of that nature. Clearly a discussion that requires leadership. It is in this circumstance, again, that Dr. Rowley has stepped in to provide leadership, to provide understanding, and to strengthen our sense of who we are and what we must do. It is not for ordinary men and women to take these decisions. It is easy to retreat into your insular nation and to say, well, across the waters, this is what they're thinking, and we should let them think what they wish to think, and you retreat into your space. In fact, the forces in the region could easily drive each prime minister into their corner, and from their corner, they look out upon their brothers and sisters. It requires a certain kind of character and personality to say, I have a responsibility, not only for my island. I have a responsibility for this region and all of the people in it and its future. And therefore, I will enter that space to provide that leadership. Hosted by Prime Minister Holness, young, energetic, committed, and I should say that when I listened to Prime Minister Holness' presentation at the Heads of Governments in Guyana last week, I thought how magnificent an intervention for a young Prime Minister. I felt proud. And so we are here in what I am sure historians in the future will call the Holness Rowley Summit, that has changed the trajectory of the Caribbean. I have a sense that this moment is going to change that trajectory, because as citizens, we were all waiting for our prime ministers to step up and lead the conversation. And this is what has happened. But Prime Minister Rowley has been prepared for this moment. I have said already twice today that we do not give away first-class honors degrees in this university. We give them to our finest young minds. And we expect, dear students, that these finest young minds in their maturity will provide the leadership and the vision for this region. This week has been a moment of renewal, Prime Minister. And we can feel it within this university because we too are involved in that process of renewal. All institutions are required to renew their legitimacy. Legitimacy has a shelf life. We are now seeking through our strategic planning to re-legitimize our university among our people. And what you have done is to re-legitimize the integration movement and its integrity for the future. We cannot thank you enough. I am not going to give you a detailed biographical sketch of our Prime Minister. I will go to the end and to say he is a great Caribbean statesman prepared by this university for this role, and his time has come. And having said that, I will repeat, Prime Minister, your time has come, so please come.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Henry Beckles, for your wonderful words of encouragement. Permit me to recognize in our presence the members of the government of the people of Jamaica and the members of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, including Chief Secretary of London of Tobago and Ministers Stuart Young, Dennis Moses, and Ambassador Fitzgerald Jeffrey, and my colleague in Parliament, Member of Parliament Prakash Ramadan, members of the management of the university, distinguished guests, students, members of the media. Very soon I'll be winding up this very hectic visit to Jamaica, which for me has been an opportunity to renew so many friendships and to reestablish a connection with a place that is dear to my heart. I've left this place in the 70s, but during that time when I was like you students, if I'm allowed to say those were the golden ages of Jamaica, it was the time when Lawrence Rowe appeared on the scene. It was the time when Michael Holding appeared on the scene. It was the time when Foreman met Fraser at the National Stadium. Those were heady moments for us as students. It was also the time when we burned the red gongs. And also it was a time when students were compelled to have meals together at least 3 times a week, so as to ensure that the bonding of Caribbean people took place over the meals of the week. Today, I must say to you that there's a certain element of cynicism that pervades our society in the Caribbean. And disappointingly, it, if examined, can be deemed to have come or be coming from a loss of ownership of our space and an absence of confidence in where we're going. And you may ask yourself, especially here in Jamaica, how could this be happening? The land of Marcus Garvey, the region of Frantz Fanon, Eric Williams. How could we be, in this very challenging world, be a people who seem to be lacking in confidence? And today over lunch, as we discussed this, the comment came forward that it might be that it is not that we don't know who we are. It might not be that we have not identified the problems that we're facing. It is not that we may not have identified the solutions. But what might be happening is that we are timid in the face of the consequences of the decisions that we have to make. And in that situation, we settle for prevarication, scapegoating, blame throwing, and worse, individualism. My trip to Jamaica this week was meant to address the last part, and that is, none of us in this Caribbean region is better off alone. We are all better off working together. And if we thought that the period of the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s were challenging, well, we have overcome those challenges. For me, at the personal level, what was I? Who am I? I was a child in a village in Mason Hall, in the middle of Tobago, going to primary school without shoes. Coming home sometimes and there wasn't anything to eat and we had to wait until something was prepared into the night. But there were people who were saying that our children had to have education. Primary education. I have here with me Chief Secretary London. We walk the same road. He's Tobagonian like me. And the parents of those days, many of them would have settled for a primary education for their children. Today, if my daughter didn't get the limit of her tertiary education, she would feel deprived and probably blame the world. But whatever we were challenged with at that time in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, we survived and we produced. And coming from that situation of going to school without shoes, but teachers were coming every day, more than now. But getting into high school was a privilege for some. Today in Trinidad and Tobago, every child is guaranteed a place in the secondary school. And of course, today, some of our students from Trinidad and Tobago and some of your teachers who are raising money, what's going to happen with GATE? GATE being the government assistance to tertiary education where the state pays your full tuition. And the hint that something may happen to it is causing trepidation in some quarters. But during those period of challenges of the 60s and 70s, getting into university was the aspiration of few. Today, it is the entitlement of many, if not all. But we survived those periods. And we're now, in 2016, facing a completely different environment. The aspirations are still there, so we can't afford not to have the confidence to take them on. I remember as a child, in the time I just described, the conversation in Trinidad and Tobago when Britain was about to enter the common market. We were exporters of grapefruits, oranges, banana, sugar. And Trinidad and Tobago exported oil priced at $1 a barrel and not even known by us. And the question was, where would Trinidad and Tobago stand if Britain joins the common market? What's today's question? Today's question is, where would the Caribbean stand if Britain leaves the common market? Question is, are we as prepared now to treat with the decisions being made outside as we were in those days when the question was whether we can survive Britain going into the common market and losing our market space, losing our preferential treatment, and in some cases losing our identity? Are we better off now to look after our affairs as independent West Indian nations, or were we better off as colonials, taking what was coming our way? I am in firm belief that if we resort to the confidence of the West Indian manhood that drove Eric Williams and Bradshaw and Gary and those people, the challenges of today can be overcome. But we have to have the raw material, we have to have the foundation, and we have to have the human capital that is prepared to be spent on it. And when we look for that, the best place to find it, when we don't find it on the West Indies cricket field, we find it in UWI. As a student of the University of the West Indies, and I must take this, I'm not just a student. The record will show that I was the head of department at this university. I wasn't just a student who came through and got degrees. I loved the place so much that I stayed. And I was head of department. So I kind of understand this university. Mona, St. Augustine. It's a place where we have invested tremendously. And we're now calling on that investment to pay some significant dividends. And the dividends are to prepare us to treat with the challenges of today. And we're lucky in that, well, I just mentioned the historian with a futuristic approach. What more can we ask for? Somebody who understands the past and can hold up to us a beacon of the future. Because Frantz Fanon said, to not understand the past is to surrender the future. And we are confident that we have it within our Caribbean region, within our universities, within our high schools, and hopefully within our governments to do what has to be done to face down the challenges that come our way. So it was easy for me to come to Jamaica to face down the challenge of trade war between Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago. It was easy. And I leave Jamaica confident that whatever flickered would not turn into a flame. Because the week I spent here, I have not met one person, young or old, male or female, high station or low, who has said to me or implied to me that we are not better off together and that we are not brothers and sisters in this region. And if that is so, then whatever challenges we face with respect to our relationships, excuse me, it means that what is required of us as leaders, that we just have to identify the challenges and just work it out. But what the decisions has come to us or required of us, what has happened in the recent weeks, starting in Georgetown in Guyana, here in Kingston, Jamaica, is an agreement, an understanding that there's this urgency for us to reconnect with our future through our institutional arrangement. And that is why I was so happy to have had the opportunity of spending some time here with you at UWI, because the institutional arrangements, there's none better that we have put in place for the region than UWI. The University of the West Indies is an example of what works when we put things in place for us. And this morning, I raised with my colleagues in another forum here at UWI whether we could not use this as a template of success to treat with other aspects of our management of our affairs. And we mentioned the whole question of accreditation and certification in education. Why do we have to have separate ones in the region? Why do we have to have separate bodies that manage our businesses in terms of the Securities and Exchange Commissions? And I dare say, integrity commissions for public officials. One is good enough. One that has the appropriate standards and the appropriate access. But then when we are told that the head of the University of the West Indies turns up in the territory, which shall remain nameless, and is hassled at the border, we know that there's work to be done. To avoid these flickering doubts, to overcome us and grow into cynical trees, there's a requirement for the leadership of our region to level with our people. There's a view, as we discuss the movement of people, and some people believe that the free movement within Caricom should be discussed in that way. We have to be honest that we have not in place a federation or a single territory. What we are living within is a situation of a series of nations with individual sovereignties covered by individual laws. And the movement within our territories is in the context of movement between nations who have agreed within the Caricom Treaty to allow certain facilitations. And there are some minor, well, I can say minor because they mightn't bother me, but for the person who is turned back at the border, it's not minor. But there are some qualifications. And what we have agreed to do is to ensure that whatever the situation, that there's dignity at the border. And secondly, that we let our people know the conditions of travel in the region. And once they know that, I am of the view that the matters that arose recently wouldn't arise. And of course, what we won't tolerate if our future is to be secured is any exploitation of any unfortunate circumstances. That we shouldn't tolerate. Because people have done worse on misunderstandings or on exploiting minor situations which grow out of hand. We ought never to let that happen. And Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago have a bigger responsibility to demonstrate the potential and the realization of all potential by ensuring that we demonstrate that Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago accept the responsibility of leadership, and that leadership is not only for Jamaica or for Trinidad and Tobago, but for the region. Because if it is seen that Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago can't get along, and as we say in Trinidad, if that is the case, for regional integration, crapo, smoke, we pipe. On the other hand, as we move to Rio, every Jamaican, every Bahamian, every Barbadian, every Grenadian, every Tobagonian, every Trinidadian going to Rio, all of we is one family. And whatever happens to us down there happens to all of us. And we trust that we'll come back from Rio on a high. Our history is too closely intertwined. Our future is too tightly bound to one another to play fast and loose with it. I'm happy to report that the relationship between myself and the Prime Minister of Jamaica in the short time that we have been working together is an exemplary one. And that ministers of government in Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica are developing very close working bonds, and the technicians are very excited about that. So insofar as this coming home for me has brought anything, it has allowed a rekindling of these relationships. And we can do a whole lot better growing what we set out to grow within the region. But that wouldn't take us far enough to treat with the external. And that is why I was very pleased to be exposed further to the visionary approach of Vice Chancellors and the university's effort in taking our educational effort in two of our programs to China, where today I could be advised that this University of the West Indies, coming out of the root of the Imperial College and so on, this university is now going to share campus space in China and offer 2 degrees, where part of it is at UWI and the other part in China. This is UWI of the 21st century. That is the kind of thinking that is required at this time for us to secure our place in today's world. And as long as that kind of thinking and that kind of confidence is available, then we as a people should have the confidence that we think we know what to do. We're not afraid to do it. And the heads of government need to get on board in that kind of arrangement. Don't take decisions, and when we leave the meeting, we go home and make sure it's not done because we are afraid of the consequences. There are times when you're leaders and you have to lead, and there are times when you follow, but leaders are required to lead. So what Trinidad and Tobago has done, coming into the recent meetings, out of Belize we signaled, and in Georgetown we have effected the putting back on the front burner of Caricom business, the single market and economy. Because out of that would come a number of push factors. Because if we are to have a proper operating single market, there are some push factors that the political directorates will have to execute. And a single economy, the population will have to accept that this economy is all of us. And therefore the business houses will have to operate in an environment without borders. And the opportunities will be there for all, and the challenges will be there for all. And the finger pointing and the games playing will evaporate. And the respect that we will get outside of the region, the respect that we deserve, that can work for us, would be a realization not of the federation, because I'm not a dreamer. I know that we're not going to have a federation in my time. But certainly what we could have is a working unit under the Chaguaramas Treaty, which puts our people as a unit with a face to the outside world that will earn us a place, and a place of respect. And as we invest in developing our human capital, the university has not to be a place of academic satisfaction. You're required more so now than ever to be a place linked to the marketplace for the products that you're producing. And the same bold step that you've taken going to China, we need that bold step in an incubator arrangement on the campus to generate patents linked to businesses that will give us a space in the world. And at the level of the governments of the region, we undertake to be driven in our decision making by the data that relate to our business, our social services, our economic outturns, our expenditure patterns, our potential for growth. Scientifically resourced, analyzed and presented data for modern decision making. That is what is required in every cabinet room, in every Caribbean territory, and the University of the West Indies has a phenomenal role to play. You have the resources, you have the intention, the nation and the nations of the region would depend on you. Trinidad and Tobago has been in the forefront since the 1950s of investing very heavily in education. And not just education for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, but for the people of the region. Because I don't know if you know, by becoming the largest campus, we also now have undertaken to fund for the largest number of students in the region. So there's a responsibility that goes with that accolade. And from the very beginning, Dr. Williams and his colleagues ensured that Trinidad and Tobago played its role in ensuring that education stayed at the forefront in our aspirations of a developing people. That commitment remains a commitment of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, not only to its citizens, but the citizens of the region. So, those of you who are students here today, it's an exciting time to be students at UWI. I had the opportunity today to tour the medical faculty. There are fewer finer faculties around, and some of the equipment in there as good as you'll find anywhere. And so therefore, we in the Caribbean have never accepted second-class status, and we don't intend to start now. Whether it's on the cricket field, on track and field, or in education, we have never undertaken to accept anything but the best, and to offer our people anything but the best. It's an opportunity for us to observe what's happening to other people and to determine whether we, seeing our brother's house on fire, whether we should wet ours. We saw what happened in Europe recently, or what's happening in Europe with respect to Brexit. You go to bed, you're going to get up one morning and the world had a certain shape. And you go to bed at night, the same night, and the shape of the world has been changing ever since. And God forbid that certain other people get their hands on authority in our hemisphere. The world is a changing place. And therefore, we of the Caribbean, we of the land in which UWI is located, we don't want any surprises. And that is why I'm charging the university to put your thinking caps on. Observe what is happening around us and away from us and coming to us, and provide us with the analyses in preparation for the decisions that we have to take. Hard decisions, easy decisions, decisions will have to be made. But I want to be sure that when we move out of this region to meet the world, we do so with the confidence that we've done the homework, we've done the analyses, and the positions that we want to advance in defense of our interests are the positions that were best extracted from the intellect of our region. And UWI, we're counting on you. We are counting on the University of the West Indies to provide the guidance out of the proper analyses of what's happening around us. There are some politicians who read Time magazine and watch television and want to tell you they know what's going on. Don't know a thing. It requires dispassionate analysis. And of course, the perspective of the historians. As a student of Eric Williams and leading a political party which he created, I might be biased, but the perspective of history is a vantage point that is unique in treating with the lay of the land ahead. So today, I want to thank you all for recognizing my presence on this campus and receiving me and my wife Sharon and my colleagues from the government. And I want to thank the government and people of Jamaica for receiving us so warmly. And thank our students for being so excited about your future, and to give you the assurance that our Chancellor, our Vice Chancellor, our PVCs, our teachers, and the taxpayers of the region have promised you a bright future. And that future could be delivered to you if only you grasp it with both hands. And as we go forward, as one Caribbean people, we say, may God bless us all.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Prime Minister will take a few questions, perhaps contained with 10 minutes. So if you have a question, just raise your hand so I can identify you. And I made a note of crapple smoke your pipe, because our Jamaican phrase is dog nyam your supper. So we can work it together. Are there any questions? What about the, yes, I'm seeing a hand. Yes?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Dr. Rowley. I am Stephen Gardner, Urban Hall Chairman. And my question is not necessarily a question, but more of a charge or a comment to the heads of government and leaders of our university administration. When you think of Urban Hall, you think of regional integration, because it was an intentional effort to integrate students of this region and have them be under one space so that better relationships and friendships could develop to produce individuals such as yourselves who would be leading our governments and be in charge of the Caribbean region and the intention for regional integration. My charge is therefore for the ministers of government, heads of government, and the leaders of the university administration to continue the intentional effort to have regional integration being done in the Caribbean. Because we honestly recognize where its strengths lies, because there are so many other powers in the world. And as a region, we need to integrate ourselves together to fight, so to speak, to fight the challenges of the world so that we can overcome them too. So that is my charge.
Thank you very much. And the only comment I'd make on that is that the university ought not to be a place of comfort. It ought to be a place from which many loud voices can be heard about our circumstances. Don't be complacent in the expectation of plenty. The voices from the university are important in these troubled times.
Are there any other questions? We're not going to keep the Prime Minister.
There's a young lady behind there.
Good afternoon. My name is Candice Ming. My question relates to GATE. You mentioned earlier that there are some questions regarding GATE and whether something will happen to it.
Could you speak a little closer to the mic?
Are you hearing me better now? Okay. GATE, you mentioned earlier that there were some questions surrounding whether something is going to happen to it. My question is there something that's going to happen to GATE?
Well, clearly you went with us a little while. I met some Trinidad students early on, and we did talk about this at great length. Yes, we are reviewing, or we have reviewed the government assistance to tertiary education, that funding of tuition. I made the point earlier on that we aren't as flushed with cash as we were a few years ago. On the contrary, Trinidad and Tobago is experiencing some very challenging times with respect to national revenues, some significant loss of revenue as a result of the collapse of commodity prices. So that by itself is pushing us to have to close some serious budget deficits. But even without that, given that this program has been in place for a while, it was due for a review. And the review is really meant not to backtrack on our commitment to make sure that you all are educated. That commitment to ensure that you are not denied an education on the basis of inability to pay tuition is still there. But we want to extricate from the effort waste, abuse, corruption, and lack of focus. So that's what's happening right now. The report is before the cabinet. I can't tell you more, otherwise I'll have to explain to the cabinet why I'm talking about it before the cabinet agree to it. And I'm subject to the cabinet like everybody else. But what I can tell you is that we will review the recommendations with a very caring eye. That's as much as I can say now.
Yes? We have a question right here at the front. Yes? And then I'll take that question there.
Right.
Just work close to it.
So Michaela Gonzalez, President of the Guild of Students. And I just want your views. Recently at a town hall that was also held in this very room, I brought up the issue of student visa fees. And in Trinidad, the regional students that study there do not have to pay visa fees to study. I'm asking your views on the fact that your very students from Trinidad who come to study, even here at UMONA, have to pay these student visa fees. And so I want to ask your views on the removal. For example, the Guild Council this year, we want to advocate for the removal of the visa fees. I just want to know your views.
I learned about that this morning for the first time. I wasn't aware that that operated. But I'm not sure what is the purpose, whether it's a revenue-raising measure or whether it is meant to do what I don't know. But it's an initiative of the government of Jamaica, which I can't speak for. But what I can undertake, as I did a while ago to the other batch of students, what I can undertake in the context of Caricom leaders recently saying that we will work towards removing as far as we are able to all impediments to our people moving from one place to the other and experiencing the benefits of that movement. I undertake to you to raise it with the Jamaican government and to see what the answer is. But I can't speak on that subject for the government of Jamaica. And I'm sure that the university would want to join you in raising that discussion. There's one other issue that was raised with me early on with the other batch of students, and that was some, in Trinidad and Tobago, some differential treatment by council of one of our professions there with respect to certification. And I promise to raise that when I get back to Trinidad and Tobago. So I'm glad you've raised it, and we'll look into it.
Thank you. The gentleman over there leaning against the wall.
No, my chancellor asked me to let the students know that the issue was raised before when we wrote to Minister Bunting, and it was raised with also Minister Quitz. And I think there was an undertaking that once there's reciprocity it could be addressed, so we probably have to revive it.
I just raised it with Senator Rowley.
Well, the man who's charging that taxi is right here, very silent, right? Minister Rowley is right here, so, you know, okay. I'm placing Minister Reid on this assignment, right?
I think we have time for 2 more questions over here.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister.
Yes, please.
I'm Carol Walker from LukeJamaica.com and Nationwide. I'd like to ask you a question internationally. There has been a lot of noise being made by the Jamaicans about their unfair treatment when they land at the Piarco airport.
About what?
The Jamaicans when they land at the Piarco airport when they are turned back. But there's also another backlash from the Trinidadian side that says some Jamaicans come to Trinidad, and since these Jamaicans are in Trinidad, your crime rate has risen. How do you reply to that?
Well, my main response to that is that we ought not to be generalizing about Jamaicans with respect to the circumstance of a Jamaican. Every person who appears at a border is to be dealt with as an individual in his or her own right. It has been quite a misunderstanding that Jamaicans were being singled out for special treatment and bad treatment in Trinidad and Tobago. I reject that out of hand. If we look at it from the point of view of Jamaicans traveling to Trinidad and Tobago, you will see that there are tens of thousands of Jamaicans who are conducting their business in Trinidad and Tobago without any problem whatsoever. And you will see that 97% of the Jamaicans who left to come to Trinidad and Tobago entered with no problem. And the problems that seem to have taken the center stage on the front page are the circumstances of 3%. I don't know the details of every single one of them, but some of those 3%, some of those within that 3%, are persons who had failed to qualify for entry under permissible arrangements. And that's why I said early on, it's important for the leaders in the countries to say to the traveling population in the region that there are certain restrictions that could apply. And the simple arrangement is that when you get to Trinidad and Tobago, you'll be asked a question, or you could be asked a question. And if you ask a question or some questions, and those questions, the answers to those questions are such that you end up being a person who could end up being a charge on the public purse or not being able to sustain yourself, then that is a ground for being denied entry. Worse, if you could not say who you're going to, how you will sustain yourself, then those are grounds. And even worse, if by virtue of you being a known person whose association with or potential association with or record on arrival raises questions of security, then you could be denied entry. So it's in that context I want you to see this whole question about who is denied and who is not denied. However, we do concede that the arrangement, the physical arrangement and the human arrangements might not have been 100%. So we've undertaken across the board, especially in Trinidad and Tobago where this thing has come up recently, to ensure that our officers who interact with persons arriving at our borders, not just Jamaicans, but persons in general, and in particular Jamaicans who have made the accusation against us, that persons are treated with dignity. And where there are physical shortcomings in the environment at the airport, we've taken steps to improve that. And of course, we've come here to confirm that there's no problem between Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica.
May I just say that that was the tweet that got most retweets from me, that says the leadership of the region is to level with our people, let our people know the conditions of travel in the region. That's been going around. I've been busy tweeting. We can only take one more question, and I know that some of you are going to be very unhappy, but the gentleman
Yes,
right
yes.
here, yes? You're fortunate indeed.
Hi, good afternoon. Udain Horton. I'm the Caribbean representative for the Commonwealth Students Association. I know you alluded to students being given opportunities after tertiary education. You spoke a little bit about entrepreneurship. But I want you to elaborate a little bit more on those opportunities for students, because a lot of times I was a part of the Caricom youth and students organization, and students are usually complaining about opportunities after tertiary education when they go back to Trinidad. So just if you could elaborate on that a little bit more, I'd really like that.
Okay. There's great value in education for the accumulation of knowledge purpose alone. Just the inquiry into any subject is valuable, and sometimes surprises occur in terms of discoveries. What I was alluding to is the university in organizing its work program with respect to supporting students in research, particularly in postgraduate research, should support research or set about to identify research which have certain specific outcomes that are targeted and certain discoveries that are inquired into. And in the event that you are successful, some of those discoveries, whether it is in medicine, in engineering, or whatever, some of those discoveries could result in new information in the discipline, which could be patented. And if you do, as a result of those efforts, come up with patentable research, then the potential for significant earnings exist, and the building of businesses around those findings. That is what a university could do and should do at this time. So that's what I was alluding to. Okay? Thank you very much for your questions, and thank you very much again.
Now we're here with Minister Rowley Reid. The Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago mentioned something about the UII becoming one of the catalysts within the Caribbean where education is concerned. Now, how do you feel about that, with the headquarters of the UII being here in Jamaica?
Well, you know, it's a discussion that the Prime Minister and myself had over lunch, that one of the outcome of a university is precisely that. That is why the governments of the region have invested so much in this premier university, and the universities are charged with finding solutions. The world is changing, very dynamic, what's happening, Brexit and all the global changing. We have to survive as a region. You look to your university not only to educate and develop your human capital, but finding solutions, all solutions, crime, economic issues, how you're going to restructure your economy to survive in this new global world. So that is part of the charge that we must make very, very precisely and focused to the University of West Indies.
Is it only the University of the West Indies that should be leading this charge? What about the other universities that are also
Well,
looking?
you have a number of private universities, but the point is that this is a regional university, it's largely funded by the taxpayers, and this is what we are saying, that as your government, we are investing in the university, and one of the outcomes from the university, we are asking them to find solutions. As the Prime Minister said, do the research, give us the kind of data that can guide in our decision making. And even at the Ministry of Education, the School of Education here at UWI have been charged by me to look at a number of issues that I put before them, such as the whole issue of 0 to 3, what policies we need to put in place to ensure that the students, by the time they enter school, they're nurtured very well, their brains are healthy and ready to learn, and so we are going to see better education outcomes.
That was addressed to the university community by the Honourable Dr. Keith Rowley, Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago.